So this is just going to be a quick tutorial kind of to show you where to go from here in terms of how to get into texturing your character. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's going to be, your character is going to be different from mine, and it's going to be a lot of tweaking you're going to have to do depending on your method. So first thing I do is just select the character, and if you go to edit UVs, you can see that we are already UV mapped it. All we got to do now is just take a UV snapshot. Now, with a UV snapshot, you can set the size to anything. It should be a multiple of 8, so that means 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, all multiples of 8. And for this case, we're just going to make it 2048 because we just want a little bit more detail. Low poly characters, maybe you want to save in the memory, maybe you want to make it 1024. In this case, I'm just going to make it at this value, and just press OK when it says to overwrite. And then in Photoshop, what you can do is just go to where you output it in Maya and get the UV. And this is going to be the UV. You can't see it, but it's actually there. It's like invisible. For example, if I zoom in, you can see it. And what I'll do, just to make it clearer, is I'll just make a new layer, and I'll fill that layer with white. And then in this layer, I'll just I'll lock all the transparent sections of this layer, and I'll fill that with black, so it's a little bit more clear. So you can see that this is basically saying this is when you paint in this section, this is where it's going to appear on your model. For example, if I save as, and let's say I go to templates, and then I save it where I want to save it. I'll just save it as fin.psd, and just replace whatever's there. And then if I go to Maya now, what I want to do in Maya is create a material to apply to my model. So I'll go to Hypergraph, or Hypershade, and I'll go to Create Material. And in general, when I'm using Maya and I'm only making models for video game, and for example, in this case, in Unity, I'll really only use 3 different material types here, because I do most of the effects and material tweaking in Unity. In general, if I'm just making a character to see how it looks like in Maya, Lambert is for things that are kind of flat and matte colored. Blend is stuff that's kind of slightly shinier. It has like more of a glow to it, more of a ramp to the light. And then for Fong is something I'll use for like something that's leather, or really like something that reflects light in a way. But in this case, I'm just going to use Lambert, and it really doesn't matter at this point. But I have a naming technique that I like to use. If it's a texture, I'll start with texture. If it's a normal map or a bump map, I'll go like bump underscore normal underscore, and I'll just go. In this case, it's just a texture, and go texture underscore, and I'll just go body map, and I'll copy that. And then under color, you can change the color to anything you want. In this case, we're going to change it to a texture file, which is a PSD file, our Photoshop file. Change to a PSD file, and what I'm going to do is name that texture body map file. And under this one, I'll just change it to place texture body map file. And this is just my naming convention to keep things simple. You can use whatever naming convention you want. You can even not be organized. And under the image name, I'm just going to browse to the file I made. And now you can see that it's loaded into this texture. All I have to do is I can drag it, or I can just right click here, and I'll go assign existing material, and I'll go texture body map, and now texture body map is applied. And this is the very texture that we have here. So you can see if in Photoshop that if I were to change this to skin color, and just let's pretend this is not yellow, just pretend it's skin color. And if I start painting and then I saved it and I went back to Maya, I can reload the texture map here easily. The quickest way, I think, is just to open the UV texture editor and just click reload PSD here. And sometimes I just like to keep this open just while I'm texturing, to reload the PSD, see how it looks like. Now you can just get an idea that if you just kind of fill certain sets of the textures, do the textures on certain parts of the body, all you have to do is just start painting. And and you can just hide the outlines when you're not using them. You can save the file with the outlines hidden. For example, it's hidden. It's saved right now with the outline hidden, and I just reload here, and you can see that I'm slowly just texturing this guy. And you could put anything you want here. Even if you wanted to do if you want to use the reference art, you can, or you can just draw something original. And you know, I saved that here, and you know, it appears on his shirt, and it's in the exact location that it should be on the model, according to the, you know, UVs that we set out. Now we could spend all our time. Now I don't feel like I need to show you that section. All you gotta do is just look at my reference art, copy and paste parts of it in to here. For example, I could just take this part. You know, I could take this logo here, copy it, go here, paste it, save it, and then reload it here, and you know, there it is, the logo's right there. And you just gotta do that for the rest of his body, including his face, his shoes, and you might have to be a little creative. You might not be able to just paste it in from the reference art, but you're gonna have to do a little bit of drawing here. Now this is just one method. There's another method that makes it a lot easier. Just pause. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to take the character, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go File, Export Selection, and I'm going to export him as, in this case, I'm going to use in FBX, or maybe actually I use an OBJ because OBJ is simpler. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load my character into ZBrush. So I'm just going to go save it as temp, and then in ZBrush I'm going to import my character here. So my character's here, and what I'm doing is I'm just going to drag, and I'm going to hold shift to make sure that he's straight up. I'm going to release, and then what I'm going to do is I'll press T to mean I'm going to start editing this guy, and I'm going to press X to mirror, and I'm just doing this for now. But what I want to do is, from here on out, when I'm painting, I want to make sure that I'm painting with more detail. So I'm just going to divide him. But actually, before I do that, it's a good idea to go to deformation. Hold on. You have to go into morph target and store it first. That's the first thing you can do. And now, when I go to geometry, I'm going to divide him a few times, just to give him more detail. Now, navigating in ZBrush is a lot different than navigating in Maya, and you kind of have to get used to it, and you will get used to it if you use it. But I guess what's important to you right now is, of course, texturing this guy. What you can actually do aside from texturing is, in ZBrush you can actually use the sculpting tool to add more details, and then apply a normal map to your low poly character to give it the effect of having more detail in it, even though the number of polygons don't change. So that's a really useful thing to do with ZBrush and Maya together. But I'm just talking too much now. I'm just gonna get straight into texturing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to import, and I'm going to import the front side texture. So you can see the textures here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click it to highlight it, and I'm going to add to Spotlight. So now it's in Spotlight. And the thing about Spotlight is it's sort of like a projection, and you can use this to scale it. And you want to start painting on top of this character using your Spotlight. So what I do is first I select a material which is easier to paint on. For example, I just use white in this case. Then under here I take off ZAB and I change to RGB. And what this will help me do is it'll just make it so that I'm actually in painting mode and not adding and not sculpting. And so with this spotlight open, I can look at it. I can look at this object straight on and see what I'm supposed to do. In this case, with this should not be here. So wherever you click, it's going to move the spotlight in the character. And then I'm going to scale so that it matches the proportions of my character. There. So with this set up like this, what I can do is once I'm sure that it's in the right position, I press Z, and now I'm in paint mode. And now I can just actually click and brush on the character's details onto my model directly. So when I press Shift Z to hide, you can see I've painted all the detail onto my character. And you can do this you can keep doing this for your character. And make sure you don't, if you need to look at it at a certain angle, make sure you don't rotate it the wrong way. But right now I'm in mirror mode, so you can see this pixel that's moving, mirroring my movements. If you're going to use asymmetrical textures, then you might want to press X to turn off the mirroring every now and then. So you can see here, I have my character here, and now I've got to make his, I got to make his chest fit the character, so that's the exact same proportions. And then from there, I can press Z, and I can paint on the texture I want. And then I can hide it. You can see this is pretty much you just keep going, and you can rotate your character, and you could do all the stuff, just paint on all the textures. And in my opinion, this is a lot easier than using Photoshop, because you move UVs around a lot and you distribute the polygons to give enough information to do stuff, and it's going to come to a point where you just can't draw straight onto the texture unless you just project it from X, Y, or Z and just leave it and not touch it. But then of course you have polygons on the side which are all stretched and weird, and then you can't paint on top of that normally unless you use a program like ZBrush where you can paint textures directly onto the model. You can also actually do this in Photoshop. Photoshop lets you import 3D models and you can paint onto it as well, but I don't think it's as effective as using Spotlight with textures and reference you've already created. So once you have all this stuff done, for example, all this textures done, you can go to texture map and you get new from Polypaint. And what that does is it generates a new texture map based on what you've painted. So if I go new from Polypaint, you can see that this is my texture, but it's also upside down. We'll fix that a little bit later. So I just go clone texture first. And when it's cloned, what I can do is go to texture here. I can select the texture, make sure it's selected, and then flip vertically. So now it's flipped the right way, and what I can do from here is just export it. And then when I go to my character, or I just save it someplace first. Let's say tutorial texture, and I'll just save over the file I made before. I'll save it as finpsd. And then I could just actually close this. I don't need it. And in this one, I'll just I have to reload this texture. So what I'm going to do is just revert. Oh, the option's not here. Okay, I'll close it. Now I'll reopen it. And you can see this is the work we've done now. If I look at I'm going to move the UVs back into that file, because, and you can see that if I were to just to take this guy's face and paint it on and paste it here, it won't work because it's the wrong proportions now. We've moved too many UVs around that it technically won't fit if we just did that. Let's scale it up to size to show you. I'm trying my best to align it, but I can't because, see, when the mouths are aligned, the eyes aren't aligned. So that means we've done a lot of changes to this. We scaled it in very strange ways. But when you're looking at the model here, well, when I save it, for example, I'll take out the align first, and I'll save it. When I go to Maya and I reload it, everything's in the right spot in Maya. And if you want to see how a character looks like with something closer to toon shading, what I like to do is just remove all shadows. And you can do that by you can create a floodlight. If I create an ambient light, and I just change the intensity to 10, and I'll make a floodlight to kind of show how the light. Where is it? I just make sure lighting is turned on. So this is a floodlight. You can see this is how the character is going to look like with toon shading. Now this is going to take a lot of custom work. I can't teach this. You're going to have to keep working on it, and then eventually, you know, hopefully, let me just save this guy. Hopefully you'll have a finished product that is, I have a whole bunch of different models of this character. You know, I have no, it's a different one. So when you're finished everything, hopefully you'll have a character that's properly modeled like that. And this is how it looks like with floodlights on. But, you know, I believe this one's not even edge softened, so I wouldn't want to show them without edges on. But you just keep working on your texture map, and then you eventually just have one that just looks right. And it takes a lot of work to get used to this. Maybe there's a lot of things you'll learn along the way that'll make it easier. You can actually do more advanced textures like this one with more shading on it so that you don't need floodlights for it to look a certain way. You know, you have a character that looks like this, and you can see this shading is just part of his texture, but he doesn't. His eyes are just, you know, 2D. They're not 3D. But the more you do it, the more you learn. I made this character almost like immediately after I first did my low poly character, and it's not even high poly. It's still low poly. The character, you can see everything here, and it's all rigged. So here I'm just showing up my Photoshop texturing in a sped up method, and in this case I think that I probably would have I know that when I was working on the face earlier I squished it a little bit, and that's why the face has to be adjusted and it's not exactly mapping out correctly. It's because we scaled it, and we shouldn't have done that. That's my fault. And I remember I did it at some point, and that's why this face has to be squished a little bit. But normally, it would have just pasted. It actually would have just pasted right in. And then what I'm doing right now is I'm just showing that you can work on your texture bit by bit and just polish it and just work on it. You can cut pieces from your reference art. You can put it together. You know, you don't be ashamed of it. You already created the reference art, so you know, feel free to cut up your own work and put up together your character. And sometimes you might even have to tweak the model after you've textured it, because if you're working in low poly, a lot of things are unpredictable. You know, you don't know how some things are going to work out. Like for example, the face. I tweaked the face a little bit after as well, just because I felt like the cheeks were too far out and the eyes were starting to pop out in the wrong direction because of that. So yeah, you're gonna have to do a little bit of work on this on your own. I can't tell you what's going on in my head when I do this, but I just basically follow my instinct